Well, we're getting close to Christmas time, and I was going to watch A Christmas Story, but this episode put a whole new meaning on You'll Poke Your Eye Out for me, and I just don't know if I could handle it right now. Hello, interwebs! I hope you are all doing well because I am here to review the latest episode of It. Welcome to Derry. This one, episode 4, and I gotta make sure I get this one right. It's titled "The Great Swirling Apparatus of Our Planet's Function," which is definitely a mouthful for a title. So I'm gonna say right up front, I enjoyed this episode a decent amount. And also, I will give this episode credit for probably having the biggest scare of the show that actually affected me in some way. You know, I've talked about in my previous reviews that this show's scares don't really particularly hit me. Like, I've enjoyed them and they're fun for me, but they don't ever get like a big emotional reaction out of me. Most especially because of how maximalist and over the top they are, and usually very CG focused as well, which is another thing for me that sort of throws me out a little bit. However, while this episode does not change that, the scene with Marge and her eyes, which if you've seen the episode, and I'll stay spoiler-free for just a second here, but that sequence, hot fucking damn, it icked me out. Let's just say. I'm not particularly squeamish, but that one got me. I can't help but feel like if it would have been practical effects, it might have gotten me a little bit more. But I'm somewhat nitpicking at that point because this was I'll give them this. This was a very, very creative one for them. So power to this episode for that. But I'll start off, I think, beyond that with perhaps what is going to be my biggest negative of the show overall, which is the kids' storyline. Because ultimately, while they did have the sort of bait and switch with our original group of kids from the pilot episode getting murdered, the new group of kids that we've kind of settled on, for the most part, are kind of not completely one for one. I mean, there are some little nuances here and there that are different, like Will's relationship with his father and also Lily's sort of worried about being branded as hysterical, emphasis on hysterical, and all that, the history that word implies. But they are also, for the most part, still kind of hitting very similar beats from the It movies, which is the kids are learning a little bit more about Pennywise, and then it gets fear out of them. They have to band together. They try to get authority figures to listen to them, but the authority figures don't listen. Again, there's some gradations in there that are different, and some pieces in there that are different. But for the most part, they are kind of hitting very similar beats and kind of reiterating stuff that we've already seen before in It properties, So for that is kind of a little bit weaker. And it's made even a little bit worse at the top of this episode where, we had spent all last episode with the kids trying to get this evidence of Pennywise and get pictures of Pennywise. And then immediately at the top of this episode, they go to the sheriff and the sheriff doesn't believe them, listen to them, or see their evidence as legitimate. And so it kind of just feels like last week's episode was just a lot of narrative spinning to fill space with these kids. Again, they're kind of beats that we do need to hit with these kids. But ultimately, just spending so much time on it feels like we're just like filling space to get this out to be a series, at least when it comes to the kids' storyline. And then we also there's some fun bits in there, like Lily, getting mommy's little helper drugs to say, "We'll take these and we won't have fear." Was just a fun little beat and like talk and said a lot about how Lily's mom copes with her husband's death and also her probably conflicted feelings about her own daughter. So there is, it's not bad. And obviously, again, it led to that really great horror sequence with Marge, which, hot damn. But I can't help but feel it's a little reiterative. Also, I'm just, I am not a big fan of kids bullying other kids' storylines in TV shows and movies. Not to say that it's not true to life. Kids are cruel to each other. I was definitely a victim of that when I was a kid. But it's a beat that I have seen a whole bunch. So seeing Marge team up with the popular kids to sort of get at Lily, just like up her own popularity, and certainly she gets her comeuppance in this episode. It's just a kind of it's a story beat that I've seen a whole bunch, and I tend to personally just enjoy storylines with kids being dealing with conflict in more nuanced ways, like not just bullies being over the top bullies, but like more gradations and nuance in there and conflicting tensions. Again, it's not to say that the trope's bad. It's a trope for a reason. There is some truth to it. Again, I've experienced it myself. It's just a trope I've seen a billion times, and I'm just not a big fan of it when it's kind of just done straight up, which is, for the most part, is here. Slug eyes aside. Again, power to that. But what I am enjoying the show for is I am enjoying the adult storylines that we're getting throughout this. We have Charlotte, who I think is easily my favorite character of the adults in this show. I adore Charlotte, and I adore the tensions that we're seeing with her. You know, her going out of her way to help Ronnie's dad and going up against the police, and you can see like she is someone who does not take any fucks from the American system and knows full well how black people are treated in it. While her husband is trying to do that like sort of black exceptionalism thing. Like if I prove that I am, you know, really the sort of really good and like prove myself to the system, I can maybe even be an exception or show that we can all sort of rise up. And I think there is a little bit of that tension coming out, and we've touched on it before with him and Dick Halloran, where Dick Halloran is obviously sort of lower on the totem pole and still being used as a tool by the American government, and using that to try to, as we see, get, you know, benefits for the other, you know, black service members around him, but is also still ultimately being used as a tool. And so there's this interesting tension in the sort of like class difference here and how they're both sort of navigating, both Dick and the Major, you know, being used as tools by the American military and the American government, but kind of having slightly different views on it. Like the Major is sort of like trying to, again, be an exemplar of the system, like pull myself up by my bootstraps sort of ideology, where Dick is like being like fully aware of what he's being used for to a degree and trying to get some benefits out of it. But it's still sort of navigating like how long is this going to last, and ultimately what am I doing, because it's very dangerous. I'm contributing to a very dangerous project going after it, and that even comes out more in the end where he invades this indigenous kid's Taniel's mine, which was a really great sequence. And you get to learn sort of the origin story of the tribe's relationship to Pennywise, or the Gallo as they call it, which I'll talk about in a second. But I did like Dick was kind of very kind of creepy in that sequence at the end there, where he's sort of asking where the spokes were at the end. And I found that to be kind of an interesting visual, because again, you're sort of setting this like black man who's being used as a tool of the American government and using him as a weapon of violence, of extracting information out of an indigenous teenager, and sort of setting those two racialized groups that have faced the victimization of, you know, Western culture, and as we see throughout history here in the origin story from Taniel's tribe and the relationship with Pennywise, we clearly see like how those are sort of set against each other. Those racial dynamics are sort of set against each other, all in service of this project that the American government's going after. We even get some reiteration of like the nuclear anxieties in the background too, and sort of like, you know, the stuff around that, and sort of how all of these sort of things conflict together. And I find all this really fascinating. Like this is some nuanced, actually, some interesting stuff here, you know, that I think is actually really cool to see the show diving into it. So I like that complicated relationship that Charlotte has, and also we see with the Major, with her relationship with her husband, he is someone who has this like protective need. He wants to protect his son. He has this sort of like machismo of like, again, I need to prove myself. I need to protect everyone. That kind of diminishes her. He's saying like, don't push back too hard. Don't go, you know, she's like, you're defending America. I'm just trying to make it worth defending. And he's like, stop doing that. And the small moment where like Will sees Pennywise out his window and the Major runs out, and he even blames Charlotte, like, see what you did? And like blames her for their son being in danger. So I found all of that to be very, very, very cool to see those like little small moments in characterization between these characters. Very, very nice and subtle stuff. Oh, also, but actually, before I jump into the origin story, there's a cool little reference there where Will, when he sees his dad burned up in the lake or in the river where they're fishing, his dad, or Pennywise, says, "You'll burn too," which is very clearly, I guess this is spoiler warning here, but it's probably not going to be in the show, and we already know it if you've seen the It movies, but Will is Mike's dad, and I believe Mike in It Chapter 1 says that his dad died in a fire. So we do know that Will indeed burn too as an adult. So that will not probably be in this show, but we know it's already happened and is Will's ultimate fate years down the line. So that's a like, cool little reference. The origin story. I cannot speak as like an indigenous, someone from indigenous groups. I know they had an indigenous, this is a fake tribe that we're seeing in the show, but they had a real tribe consult on the show. So certainly I cannot speak to how authentically this story is portrayed. However, I found it to be kind of cool. Some of the little things here, like we see Pennywise transform into the things that this tribe fears most when the mother goes in to try and save her kid, when she went in to try and stop Pennywise. And obviously one of them is Christian missionaries, which obviously did a lot of harm throughout many, many decades here in the United States, to indigenous tribes and elsewhere in Canada and other places as around the world, frankly. Christian missionaries were not great when it came to colonization, and not great overall. So that was interesting. It's just a narrative thing. It was kind of weird to me that they the kid went in to get more of the asteroid that Pennywise came in on, which is cool to see that little piece of lore come in here even more. But getting more of the asteroid, and then her mom goes in, mom gets killed, and then she leaves and then goes back. It just feels like for narrative cohesion, it would have been better if she's just oh, my mom just died, I'm gonna go get it right now, instead of leaving, come back, whatever. It's a minor thing. But they use the pieces from the asteroid to build the spokes that are trapping in Pennywise to where he is, which is interesting. And I see one of the spokes they buried was in the turtle shell. So obviously we're getting reference to, I forget it, Machuan? Apologies if I said his name wrong, but the turtle that is sort of the main enemy of Pennywise. And also, again, remind me in the comments if I'm getting this wrong, but the spokes that are trapping Pennywise in remind me actually very much of the towers, the beams, the towers that sort of protect the Dark Tower in Stephen King lore. And I think the turtle was one of the protectors of those beams. It's been several years since I read the Dark Tower. But they said there's 13 spokes. I believe there was 12 beams because there's they had pairs, if I recall. So it was 2, so that should have been an even number. So it just reminds me of the beams that sort of uphold the Dark Tower, but I'm wondering if there's a distinction in the fact that there are 13 of them. But again, people let me know in the comments if there is 13 or if I'm forgetting something or other with that. But it felt vaguely reminiscent of that piece of lore to me. But otherwise, very cool little piece of lore there that I found very fascinating. I think that's all the major stuff that I had. A couple other small things, like the general being very aware that he is trying to extract information out of Rose, and that he knows that she's kind of aware of what he's doing, and now that they've sort of used her information, they'll know for sure that that's what he's doing. So I realize that he respects Rose's intelligence, and I think I called her Rosa, by the way, in my last review. Some of you corrected me in the comments. Thank you for that. But Rose. So that's a nice little piece that the sort of back and forth between the general and Rose, and their sort of romance from when they were kids, and how they're both kind of sussing each other out a little bit in their little game, and they're kind of both aware of that fact, which I like, that respecting of the intelligence of both characters. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything that I had. I'm sure there's a couple things here and there, but again, I'm enjoying the show, but the adult stuff I think is what I'm finding much more interesting, and I hope that the show can manage to do stuff with the kids that aren't just oh, the kids are just gonna have the scares of the show, because that's what it's basically been. All the scares, for the most part, have come from the kids interacting with Pennywise, but none of their actual plot lines feel like they are doing anything particularly structurally unique from the It movies and the books, and the original miniseries. And I'm hoping the show can at least switch it up a little bit with the kids, and not just kind of hit some sort of similar beats while we get some more interesting or different stuff with the adults in the story. That's my one major critique of the show so far. But otherwise, pretty solid. This is, again, continuing to this show. Again, it's not phenomenal. It's not oh my god, everyone needs to go out and watch this. But this show is it's beating my expectations for it. I mean, granted, my expectations weren't high, but it is beating my expectations for the show. So I'm having an enjoyable time with the show. And again, the maximalist horror here managed to get me. So kudos to the show for that. Beyond all that, what did you think of it, though? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts down below. But beyond all of that, my friends, I hope you live long and prosper.